programming.
One interesting thing to notice regarding the flat versus ball Earth debate is that proponents of both models surprisingly agree on one very important point. Globe believers and globe deniers alike agree that there is an objective, empirical, testable, and repeatable fact of reality known as level. We agree that the oceans, lakes, ponds, and other standing bodies of water on Earth are measurably level. We agree that the natural physics of water and other fluids is to find and maintain level. We also agree that instruments like plumb bobs, spirit levels, laser levels, theodolites, astrolabes, and sextants are able to accurately determine and measure that level. The only disagreement we actually have on this matter is the true meaning of the word level. When used as a noun, Merriam-Webster defines level as, quote, a horizontal condition, especially equilibrium of a fluid, marked by a horizontal surface of even altitude. A line or surface that cuts perpendicularly all plumb lines that it meets, and hence would everywhere coincide with a surface of still water. A practically horizontal surface or area of land. This definition makes it clear that the word level denotes a flat, straight, horizontal surface perpendicular to plumb. All architects and builders are well acquainted with and rely on this definition of level during their constructions, whether building huge warehouses, walls, or forts, long bridges, railways, or canals. Finding and maintaining level is of paramount importance. When astronomers use the word level, however, they use a distinctly alternate definition from the noun described above. When used as an adjective, astronomers and Merriam-Webster redefine level to mean, quote, conforming to the curvature of the liquid parts of Earth's surface. In other words, this modified definition meant to work on a globe asserts that level actually means curved. This is patent absurdity, and a paradox of pandemic proportions. But globe believers will all readily nod their heads in enthusiastic agreement that level means bent. In an age when the definitions of such obvious words as man and woman have somehow become highly divisive and debatable, it should be no surprise that the word level could also now have two completely opposite, mutually exclusive definitions existing in the same dictionary entry. Theoretical astronomers can redefine any words they like, but they cannot change the way our instruments work, nor can they change fundamental physical laws. When structures are built across vast expanses, precision leveling instruments are used to determine a meticulously calculated and diligently adhered to datum line. Even slight deviations from the datum cause catastrophic consequences, so careful precautions are always taken to ensure everything is perfectly leveled. If Earth was actually a globe of given proportions, however, structures just a quarter-mile long would already deviate from the datum line by 2 inches. In other words, if level actually means curved, as globe proponents would have us believe, builders constructing a quarter-mile wall, building, or foundation would have to factor a gradual 2-inch deviation from one end to the other just to maintain level. This is preposterous, and such theoretical considerations are never taken into account because they are practically useless and would ruin the project. Water itself is the ultimate leveling tool and has been used in construction for millennia. The surface of standing water is always perfectly flat because fluid molecules lack the ability to stack and so spread outwards towards the path of least resistance. Thus, when contained and undisturbed, fluids maintain a level surface with equal altitudes across the entire expanse. You have never and will never see the surface of standing water bend because it is physically impossible. This is precisely what theoretical astronomers propose, however, that the world's oceans, lakes, ponds, and all other bodies of water on Earth are actually slightly bent. In defiance of any practical measurements and millennia of successful constructions, they believe all standing bodies of water somehow curve around and stick to a spinning ball, and have recently redefined the word level to fit with their absurdity. The two definitions are mutually exclusive, though. Level either means a horizontal surface of even altitude, or a curved surface equidistant from a given center point. It cannot be both simultaneously, and only one definition is practically demonstrable. No scientist on Earth can provide a demonstration showing a standing body of water with a curved surface. They cannot make water wrap around and stick to a spinning sphere, nor can they explain how any leveling instrument supposedly factors curvature. Globe believers begin with their conclusion and attempt to work backwards towards their favored premise, creating such a theoretical mess as this debacle of curved level. It's like saying bent straight. There is good reason we call it sea level and not sea curve. The horizon is called such because it is always perfectly horizontal. How can you have a horizontal surface that curves? How can a straight line perpendicular to plumb ever be bent? If level means curved, then two objects at two different altitudes can still be considered level as long as they are equidistant from some curved reference frame. If level means curved, then all instruments used to determine horizontal datum lines are actually determining imperceptibly long bent lines. Similar to when woman is redefined to mean biological males on estrogen pills, when level is redefined to mean curved or bent, the word itself loses all meaning. Level either means a horizontal surface of even altitude, or a curved surface of even altitude, and it cannot be both.
The globe model claims the Earth has a circumference of 24,901 miles around the equator, a diameter across either side of 7,917 miles, and a radius from center to edge between 3,963 miles across the equator to 3,950 miles equator to pole, due to their alleged oblate spheroid, which we're told the Earth allegedly deviates from a perfect sphere by only 1/3 of 1%, which supports a spherical model in most contexts, and so it will do for debunking it. When we pull up the State Engineering and Surveyor profile map of the canals and locks of the state of New York and look at the Erie Canal running from Lake Erie to the Hudson River, we can see the surveyor's elevation of the water's surface and length of each level or distance in miles between each lock on the Erie Canal, as well as the altitude of each level above the tide water at Albany. We're interested in two places here. Lockport Lock is at mile 321, there, and Rochester Lock is at mile 259, there. 321 minus 259 makes that stretch 62 miles long, but Lockport's elevation above tidewater at Albany is 512 feet, there, and Rochester's is only 509 feet, there, showing the water down that whole 62-mile stretch only descends 3 feet from Lockport to Rochester. If the Earth were a globe 24,901 miles in circumference and proper allowance made for curvature, there would be a divergency from either end to end of each other of 2,562 feet 8 inches, or rather the apex of the arc of that 62 miles would have to be 1/4 of that divergency, meaning 640 feet of fall in both directions from the 31-mile midpoint between them to either side, 640 feet that way and 640 feet that way. Or rather, if we lived on a globe, they would have had to have dug down 640 feet deep at the 31-mile middle point of these two locks, and then dig level from each end to meet it in the middle in order to make this canal nearly level. But they didn't do that, and yet there are only 3 feet difference in elevation, as I'll show you why. The next longest level on the Erie Canal is between Syracuse and York Mills. Syracuse is at mile 166 there, and York Mills at mile 113 there. 166 minus 113 is 53 miles between them, and yet the surveyor's theodolite and transit level have both ends at just under 427 feet above tidewater at Albany. So there isn't even a 3-foot drop here, just flat as a pancake with 0 locks or gates for 53 miles. There should be a divergency of over 52 miles of 1,802 feet 8 inches, or rather, again, an intervening convex apex of that arc, again, always 1/4 the divergency, sloping at 450 feet 8 inches between them if the Earth were a sphere and 24,901 miles in circumference. But nope, nothing. Flat as a pancake. Here too, they did not have to dig down 450 feet at the 26-mile center point between the two locks and then dig level from each end to the middle. Our flat level Earth already did it for them, long before their engineers ever came along. And since these two canals cannot exist on this globe, but yet there they are, provably flat as a pancake on the ground where we live, not in the sky where we don't live, we can't be on a globe. In fact, a datum horizontal line is used in surveying and engineering for measuring distances accurately. Like here, where you have a ground changing in different elevations, it gives you a medium reference to make sure your lighthouse doesn't look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa and fall into the water. In the British House of Commons standing orders, i.e. the law, Order number 55 states that when building anything, plans have to show the surface of the ground marked on it, the intended level, and a datum horizontal line. That datum line shall be the same throughout the whole length of the work. And in the case of long projects like a waterway, cut, public carriage, road, a railway, a tram road, it has to be near one of the termini, the beginning or the end. In other words, it's against the law to assume a curved earth over long-distance engineering projects. So in order to have their cake and eat it too, as is the case in 100-mile-long waterways like the Suez Canal, they have come up with the theory of equipotential water and gravity to defy logic, observation, and physics. The Suez Canal is around 100 miles long of dead level surface water from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and no locks or allowance was made for Earth's curvature in its construction. It's simply a flat continuation from sea to shining sea. Geometry alert! Don't tune out, we'll explain this simply together. Let's say the blue arc from the Red Sea, A, to the Mediterranean Sea, E, represents the 100-mile Suez Canal on a globe, and this is not in scale. 100 miles is obviously not 1/8 of the alleged 24,900 miles of circumference on the globe model. But if this were in scale, based on the alleged Earth's circumference, the standard 8 inches per mile squared curve calculation over 100 miles used by navigators, surveyors, map makers, engineers, etc., which, yes, only works for 1/4 of a circumference, as it calculates drop and divergence away from you, not convergence back towards you on a circle. But since that 1/4 of 24,900 miles would be 6,225 miles that this formula does work for, and we're only talking about the measly 100-mile Suez Canal, that would put the total length of an alleged curve of the Suez Canal as having gone down from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea 6,666 feet 8 inches over 100 miles, or If you prefer to flip it this way, the Red Sea has gone down 6,666 feet 8 inches from the Mediterranean Sea. But really it hasn't, because geometrically, straight down is the shortest distance between 2 points, a straight line, which would actually be the green intersecting line between them, A, the Red Sea, and E, the Mediterranean Sea. Other than a yo-yo, playing card, boomerang, or paper airplane, affected by another external so-called force like aerodynamics, if you drop something, it doesn't go out away from you towards the kitchen wall for the first half of its fall and then come back in towards your feet for the second half of the fall. It drops in a straight line from your hand, point A, to your feet, point E. So you could say on a globe, A, the Red Sea doesn't actually drop 6,666 feet 8 inches to E, the Mediterranean Sea. It first goes up from A to the 50-mile yellow point B in the middle of the Suez Canal, and then drops again to point E, or vice versa, since if you take the straight green horizontal datum line and green point B between points A and E, it is obvious yellow B is higher than green B on the straight path between A and E, or E and A. So both of those green and yellow B's are on what's called the chord or convexity of the entire 100-mile distance of alleged arc between the Red Sea point A and Mediterranean Sea point E, done by taking the green horizontal datum line between them and drawing intersecting identical angled and equidistant lines from the dead center of your circle or alleged globe's latitude and longitude 0 point, shown as red point Z down there at the equator. As we go up what's called the vertical from the equator red Z to our start point of the Suez Canal A, we see that the yellow line from A to F on the vertical is perpendicular to the end of the Suez Canal measuring point E, and we notice the distance between yellow B on the alleged curve and green B on the horizontal datum line between them, drawn in orange, is roughly 1/4 the distance from A to F. And since we know the total feet of curve over the 100-mile alleged blue arc from the Red Sea A to Mediterranean Sea E at 8 inches per mile squared is 6,666 feet 8 inches, then 1/4 of that gives us 1,666.5 feet of convexity at the 50-mile Suez Canal center yellow point B, from either B to the Red Sea A or B to the Mediterranean Sea E. So to make the Suez Canal perfectly level for 100 miles on a globe, you would have to dig down its 50-mile midway point at yellow B to green B 1,666.5 feet, and then you'd be digging down 416 feet at points D and H, 1/4 of that arc between A and B or B and E. But they didn't. Not a single lock for 100 miles, because apparently globes and water on them only curve on basic paper geometry, not in reality. Ironically true, because there is no curve or globe in reality. So they say, oh, well, the surface of the water is equipotential. It has roughly the same distance to the Earth's center of gravity, so it's not necessary to dig 1,666 feet in the middle of the Suez Canal or adjust for points D or H or anything in between. But gravity is just a theory by Newton, reworked into another theory by Einstein, neither of them a fact. Yet standing at point B on top of a round hill and clearly seeing your friend waving up to you from point A down below you is reality, not theory. And I'm sorry, if this were a hill and you were standing over here at A and your friend was standing over here at E and you wanted to walk straight to each other level without your legs burning from having to climb up this hill to point B or stop yourself running down the other side, you have to dig a tunnel straight through line C. Yet the horizontal datum line of the Suez Canal is only 26 feet below the Mediterranean and is continued level from one sea to the other, and the surface water runs level and parallel with this datum line. Even a 3-year-old child could tell you that blue curved line is not the same as that green straight line. Facts are facts, Jack. Jack and Jill ran straight through a hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down as his face smashed the mound, and Jill was a flat earther after. No, Steve, water is theoretically equipotential based on theoretical gravity. Theory always trumps fact. But even if you allow them their ridiculous equipotential water theory, railways, mountain tunnels, and undersea cables are not. The London and Northwestern Railway from London to Liverpool through Birmingham is 180 miles long. C to D is the horizontal datum line from the level of the River Thames in London at D to the level of the Mersey River in Liverpool, which all their elevations were measured to build the railway. This half-cut cross shows Liverpool Mersey River there on the left and all of the surveying elevations and hills going across to the railway midpoint at Birmingham all the way on the right compared to their horizontal datum line below. H is the middle station at Birmingham with an elevation of 240 feet above their horizontal datum line below, meaning they measured it and at 240 feet above the level of the River Thames, just like with the Suez Canal, but this is a railroad track, not magical gravity water. If the Earth were a globe, then as we see here, the datum line over 180 miles would have to be the chord of the arc, blue D to D to D. So the summit of the arc at Birmingham would have to be 5,400 feet above the horizontal datum line, denoting the Trinity high water mark at London Bridge over the Thames. But nope, the engineers measure it at 240 feet. Impossible on a globe, yet there it is in reality, not a trick of the eyes or perspective, not magic gravity water, just cold hard steel, ground, and fact. Then in 1869, the UK Admiralty Navy surveyed the ocean bottom from Valencia on the western coast of Ireland, the yellow B on the right, to Trinity Bay in Newfoundland, the light blue A on the left, and laid a transatlantic cable with a steamship. C to D is the green datum horizontal line. Their survey and steamship chart showed the distance to be 1,665 nautical miles or 1,942 standard miles. To figure out how much cable they needed, the greatest depth found was here in blue at 2,422 fathoms times 6 gives you 14,554 feet deep. The next deepest section was the red line at 14,400 feet deep, while in the middle, in the orange, it's only 9,600 feet deep. But if the Earth is a 25,000-mile spherical globe and the Atlantic Ocean is convex with equipotential magic gravity water as they claim, then the green horizontal datum line would be a chord to the great arc of water above it in blue. The center would stand at 628,560 feet, or nearly 120 miles higher than the coasts of the two stations at Trinity Bay and Valencia. And the greatest depth would be the center of the ocean between the two, in orange, where it would be 106,310 fathoms, or 637,860 feet deep. But nope. It was measured at only 9,600 feet deep in reality. It should also be bloody obvious that the distance of that blue line around the basketball, call that the alleged globe water surface, is longer than the green line around the much smaller volleyball, call that the alleged globe ocean floor. So even withstanding the elevation changes on the ocean floor below, it's obvious the distance across the ocean floor would be much shorter than the distance over the surface. But in the published report, the opposite happened. The steamer ship that laid the cable went 1,665 miles, yet laid 1,852 miles of cable. Impossible on a globe. Not a trick of the eyes, a light in the sky, or magic gravity water. Just cold steel ocean floor cable and fact. We could sit here all day and show example after example of this, but there's no need, since none of this can exist on a globe, yet there they all are in reality. We cannot live on a globe.